Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Quarantine Bunker Studio. I am your man in Japan, Jay Contra, with some answers to your questions about collecting Japanese video games. As always, please leave a comment on this video or on my other videos. Give me your question, and I will try to answer it as best I can. Starting off, we've got William McKinley asking, have you seen anyone buy one of those expensive games out of the showcase? Now, William, I know this question seems a bit surprising. Maybe surprising is the wrong word, because yes, the prices that you see in the showcases nowadays, particularly at Mandarake, especially at Super Potato, are absolutely shocking. They're, even over the last few years, even as Famicom and Super Famicom have sort of leveled out, and same goes for the PC Engine, what you've seen on a lot of showcase items is that basically in the early 2010s, you saw all of the prices shoot up, and they've just stayed really, really expensive. And I definitely have seen less people buy things out of the showcase in more recent years, but yes, I still see people buy things out of the showcase. I myself have not bought anything out of the showcase in a very long time, now that I think about it. Well, no, that's not exactly true. I bought some cheap stuff at Friends out of their showcase, but it's like basically the register counter, so I don't know if that counts as a showcase anyways. But yeah, I would say in general, showcase prices here in Japan are here to stay. I don't see prices going down that much. And there's just always going to be super expensive stuff, especially stuff that's in really good condition. I see that staying in the showcase for a long time, and I see it only really being bought by very, deep-pocketed, very specialist collectors. But otherwise, yeah, I see people buy things from it occasionally, but yeah, not frequently, not at the prices that I've seen. King Triforcer asks, might there be a chance for you to check out how much PS Vita memory cards are going for over there? So I have asked my partner, a PS Vita specialist, you can find her at VitaGamerGeorge on Twitter. She says that you can find, for used memory cartridges, you can buy a 4 gigabyte cart for $5, 8 gigabytes for $10, $15 for a 16 gigabyte card, $30 for 32 gigs, and $60 for 64 gigs. So it seems like it's about $1 per gigabyte, $1.25 per gigabyte, thereabouts. That's the best information I have available. Next question, Crazy Old School asks, two questions actually. How much is Eliminate Down CIB in Japan? So if you didn't know, Eliminate Down is the second most expensive Sega Mega Drive game I've ever seen in Japan. It is a shooter. I don't know what year it was released, but I'm assuming the print run is quite low, or it's very good, or both. But the price that I usually see it go for, complete in box, in decent condition, is 1,500,000 yen. So that's about, it's 150,000 yen, excuse me. So that would make it about $1,500, give or take the exchange rate. And the most expensive game I've ever seen is Maximum Carnage for the Mega Drive. That tends to go for $3,000 or $4,000 US. Now, Eliminate Down is very expensive. It's a very expensive game for a very expensive system. Lots of Sega Mega Drive games really, really shot up in price 4 or 5 years ago, and they have not gone down. Eliminate Down has been the same price for about the last 2 or 3 years, and I don't see it going down anytime soon. Crazy Old School also asks, what does Tatsujin for the PC Engine go for in Japan? That's another one that for some reason I see it a lot. I see it sitting on shelves. I don't see it move quite a lot. Tatsujin, Truxton, I think was the English name for it. It tends to go for about $300 complete. PC Engine games are another thing that you have a lot of games that are in the $100, $200, $300 category. And because you don't really see demand for PC Engine games ever really going up or ever really going down. They stay the same. The supply has stayed about the same. So I don't see PC Engine games either going down in price, especially PC Engine, it's really difficult to say what's common or what's uncommon versus rare. I would say Tatsujin's probably an uncommon game that a lot of people want, so it prices as a rare game, if that makes any sense. Next question, Retro Moments asks, question for the Q&A, how often do you go back to the US and do you see yourself moving back at a point later in life? So for the first, how often do I go back to the US? I definitely, when I was in my mid-20s and all of my friends were getting married, I was heading back to America about almost twice a year at a certain point. You know, I definitely would go back for Christmas and the occasional wedding. That's definitely, now that everything's sort of settled down, I tend to go back once a year. As to whether I see myself moving back to the US specifically, actually, by the time this video is coming out, I should have announced that I'll be leaving Japan. So do I see myself ever going back to the United States? That is a difficult question and will probably depend on how my family feels about that going forward. And I mean that, you know, and my partner, if we make a family of our own, what we'll want to do, that'll kind of depend on whether or not I go back to the US for good. She's open to it with a few contingencies. As to whether I personally want to go back to the US, it's definitely been an itch that I've had for the last couple of years. But I don't know if that's just to leave Japan or to go back to America specifically. I know there are some things that would make it a lot easier for me to go back to Japan, like if we, you know, had a better health insurance system, would make it a lot easier to go back. But aside that, oh yeah, I miss the US all the time. And I definitely, if I was able to go back to the US easily, I would like to, but that was if I was on my own, but I'm not on my own. So that definitely sort of changes my ambitions, if that makes any sense. Next up, Overkill asks, don't you have to pay import taxes on things you ship to yourself? Now, I can only comment on this from an American perspective with some secondhand information about the UK specifically, because that's where my girlfriend is from. So starting off with what I know personally, I have, for one, there's two different ways, and I think this question was specifically about when I ship things back to America, when I ship them, not when I hand carry them, because there's a big difference. So when you hand carry your stuff, when you take your bags with you from Japan to America, and I'll only talk about America in this case, the duty-free limit for residents / citizens, I want to say it's like $600 or $800 for the amount that you bring back. I've never brought back my rare stuff yet, so I've never had to declare outrageous values on the items that I'm bringing back to America. So no, I've been very upfront about what I'm bringing back in terms of value. And even, I think I went over once. I think I went over the $800 limit once. And I gave my thing to the person that was checked, because when you're at the airport, you have to hand in your customs slip as you're leaving, and they were just like, yeah, I mean, you went over, but they said I'd gone over, but it's only really when you go really into the thousands of dollars of bringing stuff back that they actually start charging you. And America is also pretty good compared to other countries in terms of the duty that they put on things that you're bringing in through the airport. I want to say it's even maximum 2 or 3%, but that was also a couple years ago. My information could be out of date. As for shipping things, I have only just started shipping stuff back to the United States. From me to I guess my parents is who I'm addressing it to. And no, I haven't really had any issues. I think there's another duty-free limit for residents per year, I want to say, but just from the stuff that I've declared, no, I haven't had any problem shipping stuff and having to pay duty on it. because as long as you're sending it to yourself and you're marking that, yeah, it's either personal items, personal effects, or it's a gift, then like your duty bracket is completely different from if it was a commercial item. As for the UK, which I can talk about secondhand, that's a whole different thing where even if you're shipping things to yourself or you're shipping what are I guess termed as gifts to family members for them to pick up, that's I think where it's like if the value of the package is over like 20 or 30 pounds, then it's subject to duty, and that's a whole thing where my partner sent things to herself or to her friends to keep for her until she gets back. And even on small dollar amounts, like we're talking maybe $30 or $40, they haven't made it through. But then recently she sent some stuff back and was able to get it back no problem. So I don't know what the Royal Mail is like these days, but I can only speak to America and the UK in this instance. Next, Transient Image asks, I'm going to Japan later this fall. Hope that's still happening given the current situation. But this will be good for some general knowledge in 2021, which is probably when you should plan your visits back. In the greater Tokyo area, Tokyo, Yokohama, Kanagawa, what hard-offs are the best place to go for boxed Super Famicom and Mega Drive games? Love your videos. Keep up the great work. So I can tell you for Mega Drive games, I don't know about the Tokyo area specifically. The thing is about hard-offs with Mega Drive games, you don't often see them, and when you do, they're going to be kind of expensive, and you're not going to have a lot of variety there. In Tokyo specifically, and actually Kanagawa is what I can really speak to, there are a bunch of hard-offs in southern Kanagawa near Kamakura. I think one's in like Ofuna. It's right next to the train station. It's probably about an hour on one of the train lines south of Tokyo. It's absolutely worth visiting. It's in a shopping mall, and they had some of the best box prices that I've ever seen. That goes not only for the Super Famicom stuff, but for a lot of other things. In general, for if you're looking specifically for box Super Famicom stuff, you will find just the common stuff at HeartOff. If you want to find the more uncommon items, then you're just as well to go to Trader or to Friends to find Super Famicom stuff there. You'll find stuff there where the price will compete, I think, very well with HeartOff, but you'll also get just a better variety in the things that you'll find at Trader and Friends. And so that's my recommendation if you're looking for Super Famicom stuff. If you're looking for Mega Drive stuff, if you can afford it, go to Mandarake. They have a really extensive Mega Drive collection and availability. And Friends is also pretty good for Mega Drive stuff. That's the place that I would really recommend. Trader's also pretty good. Just Akihabara in general is going to be good for Mega Drive stuff. But the thing you have to know, and if you're watching this and you're not aware, the Mega Drive in Japan has a pretty extensive library, but the Mega Drive did not do as well in Japan as it did in Europe and the United States. So prices overall are going to be much more expensive than you'd be used to. And it's also much more difficult to find than you would Genesis games in, say, America, for example. Next question, Chris Greenhuff, hope I'm pronouncing that right, asks, do you know anything about the history of Super Potato? There's barely anything online about this subject, yet I'd love to know more about how and when the store franchise got started, who was behind it, and what it was like in the beginning. Okay, so I don't actually know that much about the history of Super Potato, but I can tell you this. So I know that Super Potato originated in the Kansai area. I believe it started in Osaka. And so actually when you go to Osaka, you'll actually find a bunch of Super Potatoes. And they don't just focus on retro games in Osaka. You've got the RetroCon in Nanba, which is dedicated only to the retro games, but there's like 4 or 5 other Super Potatoes in the area, and they do everything from Famicom to modern day stuff. The Tokyo location is the most famous one. There is the one that's in Akihabara. That is the big one. Like, that's the one that everybody knows. It's famous also in Japan. It's so famous that it appeared in Persona 5. That's how well it's known in Japan. And there's also one in Ikebukuro that I think opened up a few years ago. I think that might be the most recent location. The thing you need to know about Super Potato, and this is for people who either haven't been to Japan or if you haven't heard of Super Potato, it is sort of like the platonic ideal of what a Japanese retro game store is supposed to look like. You go in, just even when you're walking up the stairs to the store, it is just layered with posters, like old promotional posters for games. You walk inside, there's all this rare stuff that is not for sale. You're talking like gold cartridges, gold Famicom discs, limited edition items that they just will not sell, import games that are like Atari 2600 games that were like very, very hard to find in Japan. They're just there on display, like limited edition Game Boys. It's absolutely incredible, and I highly recommend you go there and just look and just take it in. And I think it gets a lot of foreign tourists there because it is legendary. Like I don't know when the Tokyo location opened. It has been here for at least a decade. I would guess it's been around for at least 20 years. If I had to make a bet. I think what happened with Super Potato and why it is able to charge extremely high prices is because back in the 2000s, maybe even back in the 90s, whenever it opened, it is probably the place that all the games journalists and people who were, thinking and writing about video games, when they came to Japan for things like Space World or Tokyo Game Show or any of the other big events that happen in Japan, they fly in, they go to Akihabara because everyone knows that's where you find the video game shops. They go to Super Potato because that's got the best customer experience. It is dedicated to video games. So many of the other used media shops in Akihabara, they're not focused on just video games. They do everything. They do like movies, music, toys, and video games. But Super Potato has always been about the games and some peripherals, but like just the games. So you had this clientele that would come in the 2000s and the 2010s, and they'd go back to America and they'd write about it and they'd tell their friends, they'd make videos on the internet. They'd be like, yeah, Super Potato is where you have to go. And so it has that cachet, that cultural cachet of, like, when I first came to Japan like 8 years ago, that was the only game shop that I knew by name because I had a friend tell me about it. And so that's why I went there. And so it has this history behind it. I don't know who started it. I don't know the storied history of Super Potato, but that's just the impression that I think you should have if you're coming to Japan for the first time. It's a place where you look, but then you see the prices, and then you're just like, oh, I don't know about that. And I don't know about what the prices were 20 years ago. I'm sure they were a lot better than they are now. But again, my recommendation is just look, but don't touch. Next, let's see. Someone asks, what are you using to record? I see both of your hands are free. This is referring to, I think, one of the store videos that I pulled this question from. So I often get this question when I'm doing store videos. I've actually kind of changed it up. So when I'm doing a hands-free video with the sort of the in-camera narration, one of those sort of live shoots, that's when I'm using an action camera that I have mounted. I have a little strap that mounts it to my backpack. That is an E4K. It's a couple years old now. It might be 1 or 2 years old at this point. It's fine. The footage quality I'm shooting in it's 2K, I think. And I find it a bit grainy. It doesn't deal with low light all that well. The microphone is really bad. I would much rather have like a GoPro, maybe Hero 7 or Hero 8, whichever, not the most recent one is. But the E4K is fine. It's really cheap. I think I bought it for like $100 and it served me pretty well. It does shoot in 4K, by the way, but when you use it in 4K, it doesn't give you the smoothing, and it's also, the 4K is not really great on it, to be honest. What I'm shooting on right now, and what I actually shoot all of my Showcase Showdown videos, is an iPhone 11, just the base, the 11, whatever the most recent one was. I bought it last year. Absolutely love the video quality of it. Microphones, really, really good. As for other cameras, I used to shoot a bunch of videos with my Sony NEX5R, which is a really, really old mirrorless camera, but now the iPhone is actually like better than that mirrorless camera at this point. So yeah, that's what I shoot my videos with, if you're looking for tips. Mr. Nicholas7 asks, when I was researching for my last trip to Japan, I discovered that BookOff is not actually part of the HeartOff Corporation. That being said, I believe they're just the off conglomerate, I think is what they're part of. You know, HouseOff, LiquorOff, HobbyOff, BookOff. I think they're all in the same conglomerate. They're not the same company, but they're in the same sort of like, they're in the pie, as it were. That being said, they share a lot of the same store space and their logos are stylized the same, which just seems to confuse the situation. Would you be able to shed some light on what is going on there aside from the larger selection at HeartOff? Is there anything that differs between the two that a game collector should know about? Okay, well, I guess from I'll do this from two different ways. So when you come to Japan, you'll see a lot of signs for a place called BookOff. There are HeartOffs, but when you're going to the big cities, you will generally only see BookOff. This will go alongside, sometimes you'll see signs for places like HouseOff, HobbyOff, HeartOff. They're all a part of the same group of companies. It's like, it's some weird business thing, particularly in Japan. You've got a lot of companies that they're under the same umbrella, but they have different management and they have different styles. So we need to talk about the two specific that I generally talk about on this channel, which is BookOff and HeartOff. So I'll go into the differences between the two, especially if you're new to Japan or new to this channel. One is BookOff. That is more in your urban areas. There are lots of different kinds of BookOffs actually within the BookOff brand. There are BookOff Super Bazaars and then there are regular BookOffs. Regular BookOffs, which you'll find all over the place, even in like in suburbs and rural areas. BookOffs are just your general like used media shop. They have used movies, used games, used modern games. So basically anything from DS to Switch, PS3, sometimes even PS2 to now, to like, PS4 stuff. They also will sometimes do like electronics and books, true to their name, especially comic books. Going into a BookOff is an absolutely amazing experience because you'll see all the manga and all the print goods that they have there. It's really worth visiting at least one. Then above that, you've got the BookOff Super Bazaar. The Super Bazaar has a mix of everything. Sometimes it'll have clothes, it'll have hobby goods, it'll have trading cards, in addition to all of the modern games and the movies and the DVDs and the books. Super Bazaars will also tend to have retro games like Super Famicom, all different kinds of retro games, sometimes even PC Engine stuff. I once found a Rondo of Blood for the PC Engine CD at a BookOff Super Bazaar. Contrast that with HeartOff. Now, HeartOff there's a couple in Tokyo. You'll find them out in like residential areas. You won't find them in city centers. Now, what HeartOffs will focus on are electronics, musical instruments, sometimes analog records, video games, retro video games, and modern video games, sometimes toys. What I gotta say about the HeartOff and the BookOff, the distinction between the two is that HeartOffs will have all different kinds of things for sale depending on the location. Some HeartOffs will have musical instruments, some will not. Some will have action figures, some will not. Whereas with BookOffs will always have games, comic books, and movies for sale. Sometimes it will also be different. Some will have TVs for sale, but the commonality between HeartOff and BookOff, and really any of the offs, is that they're all used goods. Sometimes they'll have things someone will trade in, like a sealed copy of a game. I don't know if I've ever seen a sealed copy of a game at a BookOff or at a HeartOff. I've definitely bought things that may as well have been sealed from a HeartOff. Like basically, you buy it, it's sold as used, but you pull it out and it's almost like nobody touched it. But that's just one of the things that sometimes you get lucky. I definitely bought a Game Boy Pocket from a BookOff once that it was so new that it still had the batteries, the original batteries, and that was actually somewhat of a negative because the batteries had started leaking and they had sort of like browned the area that they were held in, because apparently the Game Boy Pocket in Japan came with a set of AA batteries. But that was really neat. I'm glad to at least have that in the box. So I hope that explains the difference between BookOff and HeartOff. If you want me to go more in depth, just please leave me a comment. Next question, Bogus Productions 195 asks, what is the state of 3DS collecting in Japan, and do you collect them? So the 3DS is definitely entering the end of its life cycle. The Switch has been out for what, 3 years at this point? So the 3DS is definitely, this is the time to buy 3DS games. They're probably entering the trough. I don't know of any extremely rare 3DS games or any extremely expensive ones. Contrast that with the DS, where you're now starting to see $100 and $200 DS games. 3DS hasn't reached that point. I don't think it will for another 5 years. Now's the time to buy 3DS stuff. That's just sort of, I don't know that much about the 3DS. I'm trying to get more into portable gaming, but I don't know that much about it. I just know that I've never seen a 3DS game in a showcase. And there will be a point where that will happen. It's probably just not going to be another 2 or 3 years. So now, if you know you want these games, now is the time to buy them. Next question, Dale Grady asks, what's the best way to commute away from train stations? I was supposed to be over in May, all canceled now, and was struggling with how to take a train and then wiggle my way to multiple shops to another station. I understand you can't take bikes on train, electric scooters are a no-no. What would your solution be for a 12 to 20 kilometer route? So last time I was in Tokyo going to HeartOffs near train stations, I tended to walk most places. Now that can really depend, because if you want to, if you're in West Tokyo, where there are a lot of HeartOffs sort of around train stations and you don't want to keep hopping on trains, what I would do is when you come to Japan, if your hotel does not have a pocket Wi-Fi provided, I would get a SIM card at the airport. I would pop that in your phone, and I would just use Google Maps to take the bus. The bus route feature of Google Maps in Japan is very, very good. I've used it to hop from some different HeartOffs, and that's really the only thing I can suggest, because you're right. In Japan, I think there are some collapsible bikes that you could get. I doubt you could find them at a rental shop. So yeah, bikes are not going to be an option. Electric scooters are classified as motor vehicles, so you'll need a license to ride one of them. And other than that, what I would do is I would just take the bus. That's my only suggestion from personal experience, and just use Google Maps to find the routes. It's very easy to use it. Next question, Seething Simp asks, it seems Japanese GameCube consoles have been worthless for 10 plus years, aside from the few variants. Any reason why nobody gives a damn? That's a very interesting point, Seething. Yes, I would say the rare variants are very expensive. I've noticed a slight uptick in Akihabara for the price of GameCube consoles, even the orange ones, which everybody wants. But I can still go to a HeartOff and buy a GameCube for about 4,000 yen, which is the same thing I could have bought with the same price I could have bought it for 5 years ago. For some reason, it seems like the nostalgia in Japan I think it's because it all went towards the PS2. Even for the GameCube, there aren't really any super expensive games. Like the most expensive games, there's one with a jack-o'-lantern on it that I can't remember the name of. There's that one. There's the Metal Gear port that was technically not for sale. It was part of the Metal Gear Solid re-release collection. And then there is another GameCube game that I can't remember. Like Kirby's Air Ride is maybe $80, but there's no super, super expensive GameCube console, regular console, or game. So I don't know what happened. But even the N64 isn't that expensive. So I think the nostalgia just went over. I think all the money started flowing over to the PlayStation and started going away from Nintendo. Whereas with the Super Famicom was so monolithic in Japan that I think that's where all the money went in terms of collecting, as well as because the Genesis was so hard to find. Whereas with the PlayStation, you had so many copies printed, and probably same goes for the GameCube. I think probably it's because you just had more people playing games in the early 2000s than you did in the early 90s. That might be one of the reasons, is that there's just more consoles about, maybe. Next question, Farah64 asks, hey Jay Contra, watching you now for a while, and it's pretty funny you mentioned that Pokemon topic in your newest video. Could you give me good price hints about all Pokemon games up to Game Boy Color Advance era? So for the first gen, which is in Japan, red, green, and blue, those tend to be, I would not pay more than $30 for any one of those. I think red tends to be a bit more expensive because it's a bit more sought after, but you can find copies of green and blue very easily. For gold and silver and crystal and yellow, yellow is also $20, $30. Even the Game Boy Color ones, Gen 2, I wouldn't spend more than $30 on. They're very plentiful, very cheap, could easily find them. The Game Boy Advance ones shot up for a hot minute there. That's actually weird. Actually, yeah. So there is Ruby and Sapphire. Those have reached, I want to say $30, $35. I would not pay over $40 for Ruby or Sapphire. Then you've got Emerald. Now, Emerald is a very interesting case because I've seen the price on that all over the place. I was just at Surugaya and I saw it for $90. Now, you could just walk down the street and go to Trader and find it for $50. Same also goes for Fire Red and Leaf Green. Maximum $50. You could probably find them for $30 or $40 if you take your time and look. But yeah, basically any of these games, I would not pay more than $50. Anything before the Game Boy Advance, so Gen 1, Gen 2, nothing more than $30 or $35 is even, that's Akihabara prices for those games. Next, Zekrom asks, one thing I love to do in the States is ask, for example, at a pawn shop, can I see what's behind the counter if they have new stuff that hasn't been priced? Is that okay or acceptable to do at a HeartOff? I've been to HeartOffs where I've seen interesting stuff behind the counter and tried to ask about it, but got hit with the language barrier. Would love to know. So in my experience, if it's stuff that's like been recently traded in, no, I mean, you could, I don't even know. I mean, they might let you look at it, but if it's not been priced, then they're probably not going to let you buy it. And they probably won't even like make a price for you because the way the trade-in system works is I can remember very specifically, I have a very good memory of when I went to a HeartOff once. They had like a Super Graphics and a Neo Geo that had been recently traded in, and it was at a place that I knew priced their consoles very cheaply. So I was like, yes, okay, now's the time. And I was like, hey, can I look at the Super Graphics? Can I look at the Neo Geo? And they were like, no, we got them in, but we've got a guy who's gonna come in and take a look at them. Because what I'm guessing is happening is, especially for the rare stuff, is they might have someone come in to not only just to check to make sure it's in working order, but evaluate the condition and also put a price on it. Because what I would expect at a place like this is they would clack into the system, they would scan the barcode, get a good price range and then price it according to whatever is in the system. But because HeartOffs, you've seen such variance on the price that I'm guessing either a system like that doesn't really exist, which I thought it would on a national level, and maybe it does, but at least a few years ago, yeah, when I asked to check stuff behind the counter, they would not let me even make an offer, or they wouldn't tell me what it was going to be priced at. So yeah, I don't know what to tell you, Zekrom, but that's just been my experience with stuff that's not in the showcase, but stuff that's been like recently traded in and is behind the counter. So that's, yeah, I think that you're not just going to be able to get your hands on it for a while. So final question, Dendi asks, do they sell 360 games in English? I will visit Japan next year. So There's two ways to look at this question. The first is, do they sell, I guess, American games or foreign games in Japan? Generally, no. However, if you go to Trader in Akihabara, they have, I don't want to say good because it's not like it's that many games, but they will have foreign 360 games. As for 360 games, you are able to play in English. So this is going to depend on the game. But even back in the 360 era, in sort of the mid 2010s, well, in the late 2010s, the late 2000s, early 2010s, there are some games that were like had all of the languages on the disc. So it just depended on either your console region or whatever language you had your console set to. So that means you could buy a Japanese copy of, say, Halo, for example. You pop that copy into your American 360, it's still going to play. And it's also oftentimes going to play in English. Sometimes it'll have Japanese subtitles. Now, if you're looking for Japanese games, there's maybe been one or two, and I couldn't even tell you the title, that have English as an option. I think Bayonetta actually, some games actually like Bayonetta. Bayonetta is a really good example where when it's on release, even in Japan, it does not have Japanese. It might have Japanese subtitles. Like I know No More Heroes is another example, like for the Wii, or I think even for the, I think the original release for the Wii, it didn't have Japanese voice acting. It only had, I think, Japanese, you might have been able to switch the menu, but it had Japanese subtitles. So again, it's going to be on a game-by-game basis. If you're looking for foreign games, the Xbox 360 was just not a super popular console in Japan. So you're going to have a real hard time finding Xbox 360 games just in general. But English language games, either foreign or Japanese produced, is going to be, I think, even more difficult for the 360. Overall, the 360, if you just for a general knowledge, 360 shooters have really gone up in price. They're starting to get very expensive into the $100 and $200 range. And otherwise, I don't think there's any super valuable 360 games now that I think about it. But that's another system that I'd love to know more about. Just haven't gotten into it. Final note, 360 is not super popular in Japan. So there's actually a lot of cheap games out there that you can find. So I had a good time doing the Q&A. I hope you learned a few things. I hope I answered your questions well enough. If there's anything else you'd like me to talk about, if you have any questions for a future Q&A video, please leave them on this video. I like to collect the questions and do it at least once a month, once every other month, depending on the volume. But again, just leave me your question and I will answer it to the best of my ability. I have been your man in Japan, Jay Contra, saying thanks for watching, see you next time, and mahalo.